Mixing with Mike plugin of the week comes from Baby Audio. It is the TAIP plugin, TAIP, the AI standing for artificial intelligence. Let's take a look and see how intelligent it is. Now, in the very beginning of their description of this, they talk about the AI portion of it, and it's an interesting topic because to me, artificial intelligence is all about intelligently interacting with the environment and, in this case, the user. And that's not really what's happening here. The artificial intelligence was part of the process of creating the plugin and developing and building the algorithms from which it runs. So it's a little bit different. And I guess I'm not going to belabor and debate the topic there, although I find it an interesting point. So in I think a fully artificial intelligent environment, the plugin, whatever, would be learning what you like and what you don't like, and then sort of working in the same direction that you effectively go when you put your plugin on a bass track or a kick drum track or whatever. We'll see how that develops in the future. In the meantime, this is actually a really cool plugin. I like it. Now, I've done a lot of tape emulation plugins. I wouldn't call this a tape emulation. It's not emulating a specific tape machine that I know of or that they mention, like a Studer or an ATR or something along those lines. But what it is doing is capturing certain aspects, exaggerating those aspects of, tape compression, saturation, etc., and putting them into a usable plugin with a very simple interface that allows you to basically dial in a sound quickly. And there's nothing wrong with that. And as long as it sounds good, happy days. We move forward. So we have a drive plugin. This is basically your input control, right? So this is like how you will add color and saturation, etc. There's an output control, which gives you a way of balancing the output based on how much you drive. In the center here, there's an auto gain feature. So with the auto gain feature on, as you drive input level, you will pull down output level, or it will automatically do it in the background. So more or less, you end up with something emulating a unity gain. It doesn't end up being that way, but almost none ever do. There's a wet-dry mix control, which we have going on here. The noise control, which is just basically bringing in tape hiss and all of those sorts of things, noises that would be true to the analog realm. The wear control is a feature that emulates some of the nonlinear characteristics of tape, primarily being wow, flutter, and the altered frequency response. Because tape machines are mechanical mechanisms, that the heads in particular wear. Right? They wear out, they flatten out. At some point, they need to be re-rounded. There's a whole process for that called relapping. And so some of those things affect frequency response and all of those sort of things. So we have a little bit of that's in there. Glue, what they call glue, is somewhat of a way of controlling tape compression. Tape compression is unique, not totally unique, but in that it's a magnetic medium, and it can only handle so much charge. So when you apply more magnetic field strength than it can handle, it will start to resist having any more magnetic field strength applied to it. And so that is a form of compression. The unique thing about tape compression is that it doesn't have any kind of a fixed ratio like most compressors where you select it. Actually, the harder you hit it, the more aggressive the compression becomes. It's like a form of increasing the ratio the more level that you drive into it, and decreasing it as you release and put less in. That's the way tape compression primarily works. So think of it as a variable ratio control. You could drive the input with a simple hot or normal control. So that's just basically, we're driving it for distortion. Here we're operating in a somewhat, moderately aggressive but not over-the-top aggressive fashion. This is not designed to be a pretty plugin in that sense. So that's the way I'm going to demonstrate it. It'll operate in single or dual mode. In single mode, that's like a normal tape machine. and it will just, whatever level you apply, it'll do it that way. The dual mode puts two tape machines in series. So the process runs in series, and then it divides up the amount of drive between the two. That's the way that they basically describe it. So effectively, I would think you would be getting less of the characteristics with two of them in a row, but getting a little bit something different from each. I don't know. I guess I'm not sure how much that differs from just a single and driving it less. I guess we'll find out. The presence control compensates for high frequency loss. Most high frequency loss with tape machines is something that occurs over time. Because it's a magnetic medium, the magnetic oxide particles that hold the charge influence each other. So those variations in negativity and positivity start to average each other out a little bit. So generally, a brand new reel of tape, when you record on it, will give you like a good, steady, full, consistent frequency response for a couple of weeks, and then it will slowly start to degrade. That process probably starts immediately. But 6 months later, it's not going to sound as clear and crisp as it did. And other things that would wear down frequency response are usage. So if you're running the tape across the heads, some of those oxide particles are flying off, like lint. And, and so there's a little bit of clarity and definition that goes away. This is meant to compensate for that. The high shape and low shape is a way of basically adding a little bit of color, plus minus, either focusing or taking away certain frequency areas from the saturation process. So it's not like adding high frequency energy in necessarily, although you may hear some of that effect if you drive into it, but it's where you're driving the distortion. That's essentially what you have there. So high shape and low shape, you're good there. We have a resize control. Let's see. Up here are all of the different GUI things. If you like the dark color or dark mode, I have it in the medium. That's a little too bright for me. Whatever works best for your situation. This will reset to the stock settings of the plugin. So it's not an undo. Be careful about that. And this is just a series of factory presets that you can load up. And sometimes that's very valuable as a way to kind of gauge what the overall effect of something, give you a range of what the possibilities are. And there's some pretty cool things. There's some interaction with some of this stuff. So let's run some drums through it a little bit and just kind of get a sense for what we got, and then talk a little bit about it and go to some other effects that it has built into it. Right, so you can see here I pulled the output level down a little bit. It's driving a little bit more level on output. This is generally kind of see this. A lot of it is just it's bringing in more presence energy. Perhaps that has to do with the default setting here at 25. Let's go to the input control here and then just show the difference here between normal and hot. Right, so that's adding a lot more gain. I'm not sure that perhaps this is word right. It feels like it's actually driving more into it than almost like doubling the drive rather than splitting the drive between two machines, which would give me the sense that it's leaving in more dynamic. So maybe I'm missing something there. But let's work on pushing the drive control here even farther, and let's just see how much we can saturate it. Okay, so there are two things that of note that are interesting. One, I'm noticing that the wheels both drive in the same direction, and they're both driving in the wrong direction, where you think they would be driving in opposite directions, so that the tape going from one side to the other would actually go from the supply side to the take-up side without spilling on the floor. But this is a simple oversight that's, not important. And when you grab onto it, it's like grabbing onto the reel. Okay, never mind. All right, so anyway, obviously the drive control, we can drive more distortion in, and you can get a sense for that. Let's go to what some of the other controls are. The noise is just straight out noise. The glue is more the tape compression thing. So let's see what we got up here with this. I like that a lot, as long as you balance the output. Now, the auto gain makeup sets the output, balances it to the drive control. It's not balancing it to the other, at least not to the glue, as I see here. Also, the other thing to factor in is that when you compress something, there's less dynamic range, and then when you put the more dynamic range version of that in, you get a less consistent energy, and therefore, sometimes it's mathematically, it may end up on a meter looking different, but sounding right at -5. That was my thing here. Now, there's an interesting feature, the wear control here, and this has a cool effect that you can use with the mix control. Right, so you could hear how it degrades the frequency response. But notice what happens here if I bring this in and then move the mix control into place. And this is also cool because you can just sort of automate it in with the mix control if you wanted it in for a particular section, and then automate it out. And that way you can sort of have it sweep and kind of crossfade. So that kind of thing is cool. This variation is also kind of an interesting, cool effect for bringing more depth into something. And depending upon the element or the instrument, it works really effectively on things like pads and stuff like that, because it's somewhat like a modulation effect, except it's random. I don't know exactly how they programmed it here, but there's a randomness built into it, put it that way. The noise is just noise. Right, so not a whole lot to go over there. Sometimes that's a cool, like as an effect or something like that. That you can sort of build in. I don't know if you can have phased noise. Let me just see. It seems like it just pretty stays steady, but that's okay. Let's see. Let's go to the presence control and some of the other controls over here on the right-hand side. Right. So obviously it's just, it's bringing in some presence, but actually in a very musical kind of way. Let's bring in the high shape control. So if I drive it this way, it should drive more saturation into the higher frequencies. If I drive it this way, it will give me more low frequency saturation, right? Less high frequency saturation. I'm sorry, put it that way. And I suppose if I drove this a little hotter, that might be more aggressive. It sounds actually the opposite. It sounds like, because when I push this down here, it gets darker and duller, and then those cymbal crashes sound very distorted. So that seems to be working in a little bit in the opposite direction. Let's see what's happening with the low shape. When I first thought this, I thought, is this sort of like an equalization control, which you generally get with the alignment of the tape machine, or emulating the sort of frequency bump, the low end bump that you get with different tape machines, that are just sort of a byproduct of physical, inconsistencies in the design of the tape machines. There's a lot of electronics that compensate for this, allow you to calibrate it to even it out. But it turns out this is just a purely saturation focus thing. So let's see if this holds true, and this is true with the low end, and this will make the low end more distorted, and this would make it less distorted. Let's see what happens. And that would actually be the case. So if I actually went ahead and drove this up here, all right, a little bit on the aggressive side. Go back. So the cool thing I like about this is there's a lot of tonal shaping options when you start to factor in some of this stuff. Also, you always have the wet-dry control, the glue control, and the drive control. So you're really getting an amount of distortion, which you could also back off of, if you wanted to go that way, and find some balance between the two, and then the compression for the density. It gives a lot of tonal possibility. Almost more like just a tape saturation plugin, I guess, is effectively what it is, as opposed to a tape emulation plugin that would be something that would be more, subtle. But that is by design, and that's what they put on the front page of it, and that's the way that Baby Audio rolls. So, rockin'. I dig it. I think it's a valuable tool. Very nicely priced on that end as well. I like the sound, I like the vibe of it, and it may be a valuable element in your toolkit, giving you a fair amount of range of different tonal characters. And so it is. I demoed it. Shortly after demoing it, I purchased it, and there you have it. Baby Audio. TAIP. It's the plugin of the week.